All right, welcome back to the Powers on Sports podcast. We have arrived to the month of March. March Madness is almost here, folks. Less than 2 weeks away from Selection Sunday, about 3 weeks away from the first tip of the NCAA tournament. And nobody better to talk SEC basketball, NCAA March Madness. We're going to talk a little baseball with my man Vince Ferrara, 99.1, the sports animal in Knoxville. He's the voice of Tennessee baseball. He's a Jefferson High School graduate down here in Tampa. Welcome back to the podcast, Vince.
Always great to talk to you, JP. Doing all right?
Yeah, man, everything's good. Everything's good. All right, so I know you had a little baseball story over the weekend. Tell the audience a little your Tennessee baseball over the weekend.
Yeah, I hadn't gone back and counted all the pitches, but I was there on the call of all of them. And Tennessee played Iona. Rick Pitino had no influence on Iona's baseball. Unfortunately, he was probably sick about the defense and the pitching too. But Tennessee won Friday night 27-1. Then on Saturday, Tennessee won 29-0. That was the largest margin of victory in a single game in Tennessee program history. Wasn't the most runs, by the way. And then they finally decided on a run rule on Sunday, yesterday, and Tennessee won 12-2, so Iona could make their long bus ride back to New Rochelle, New York from Knoxville, Tennessee.
That has got to be brutal. A bus ride from Knoxville to New Rochelle, New York.
It's so tough, Jason, because a lot of these teams in the Northeast, it probably doesn't get talked about enough, they don't see live pitching. They've been in batting cages. They don't get a chance to practice outside. And their first weekend, they were destroyed by Old Dominion as a ranked team, and they're playing one of the better SEC teams after that. Now it gets much better. Last year, they only had 14 games last year. They played in conference alone, just 14 games, and there were 7 doubleheaders.
Wow.
And they only played so think about that. You're playing a college baseball season. You only have 7 baseball dates in your season, and they play and they would be 4-game series. So they play Friday night to Saturday night too. And so they only played 4 different opponents. That was their baseball experience last year, on top of not getting to prepare this year. It's just really tough and unfortunate, but look, Tennessee handled their business with maturity, which is what you want to see. It didn't guarantee them anything in the SEC. Sure. But if they were to mess around and cut corners and not be focused and all that, but they weren't. They just handled their situation. Trust me, it could have been much worse. They still kind of called off the dogs, but they were still executing pitches and at bats and stuff. So good for them.
And it makes it hard for those Northeastern teams. Like you said, the weather's an issue. Yeah. They all come down here usually for a week, a couple weekends. To one, get a little warm weather. 2, it's spring break season all around the country. At the colleges starting here the next couple of weeks, where people are on spring break and they'll get some games. They'll come down south to get some games. So, and then the worst part is the travel. That's the part that's disappointing, is that they don't even at least get to get on a plane and fly back to their campus. They got to take a God knows how long bus trip from Knoxville or wherever else they're playing back up to New York. That's to me, that's a tough part for being the student athlete. Just the pure being a student athlete part of that whole deal.
And then, hey, keep up with your school. You're gonna miss classes because you're on a bus, or you have to turn around and in 2 hours sleep you have to make a 9 a.m. class. It's unfortunate, but there's just not the budget for some of those programs. But hey, at least the program is there, and some of these kids get to kind of live out their their dreams and be able to play. Yeah, because they're not going to play pro ball, so at least get it done on the college level.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to some SEC basketball talk. It's been a great SEC year so far. I brought you on because Tennessee's right in the mix. The last couple of weeks, 2 huge wins. They've beaten Kentucky. They beat Auburn over the weekend. Sky high must be the thoughts of jubilation in March must be sky high in Knoxville these days.
Well, certainly those 2 atmospheres were incredible. And don't forget, they beat another top 5 team earlier this year in Arizona. And that was an electric atmosphere. So, I mean, think about those 3 wins: Arizona, Kentucky, Auburn. put that up on a graphic and give me 3 better wins for any team in the country.
Right.
Now, they were all at home, so that helps. Tennessee hadn't lost at home this year, so that's all amazing. Problem is that the NCAA tournament
ain't at home.
Not going to be played. Yeah, not going to be played at Thompson-Boling Arena in Knoxville. So I think there's tremendous excitement. I still think for some fans, though, there's a little bit of doubt for the postseason because they had those 2 great teams a number of years ago with Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams, and they honestly underachieved those 2 years with them. One, they got to the round of 32 and ran into Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago. and then the year after that, they got to the Sweet 16 and lost a game in the final seconds to Carson Edwards and Purdue.
Yeah,
I was there. That was in Louisville. So those 2 teams were supposed to go much farther than that. Rick Barnes doesn't have the track record of deep postseason runs. So I think there's some fans that are still a little hesitant to fully be invested this year. But look what happened in college basketball this weekend, Jason. You're well aware of it, with the 7 top 10 teams losing on the same day and all the top 5. Now, they were all on the road, but still it shows that everybody has some flaws and everybody is beatable. This team, when they shoot well, with the way they defend, they're an elite defensive team. They can beat anybody. But there's some nights where not just they don't shoot well, they shoot horrific, and their defense can't bail them out.
Right.
And the numbers show in those games. So can they avoid those games where they're shooting in the 20s? If they do, this team is really good. They didn't shoot that great against Auburn, but they still were so good defensively, got some points of transition out of it and found a way. But every once in a while, those clunker offensive performances still rise up.
And remember now, folks, everybody in the conference knows each other so well at this point of the season. They've all played 15, 16 conference games. Right. They've scouted each other to the hilt. So when you're playing these teams on the second time, especially, these guys know each other. You know the sets they're going to run. You know the schemes. Whereas in the NCAA tournament, you haven't seen a different team. You haven't seen an Iona and Rick Pitino. You haven't seen a Wichita State kind of team, a Loyola Chicago when you're an SEC team. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic of, will the defense hold up? Will the defense be a key of why Tennessee can advance, where you can get away with maybe a poor shooting day because defensively they're so good?
No, it's a great point. Also goes the other way too, right? Like, you have to be able, if you've been able to adjust to your opponent, you don't have that luxury when you don't know them as well. That comes down to, right, your staff, how good your staff is with their scout and how good your players are at executing the scouts. Tennessee has 2 new assistant coaches this year when Rick Barnes has had great staff continuity. So we'll see. They haven't been through a postseason as a unit before. And there are some times where Barnes has kind of lamented in the post game that, hey, we had this plan and, our guys didn't stick to it. But then there's other times where they knew exactly what the opponent was doing, and they're so good on the perimeter with Chandler and Vescovy in terms of steals. And then Zakai Ziegler as well. He's been awesome off the bench for them, a kid from Brooklyn, New York. That trio is as good of a trio of guards as you will find in this league, and up there somewhere in the country also. So that will give them a chance. I think the defense will travel, and it is kind of a young team overall. So you just never know whether, if you don't know an opponent, how those guys are going to be able to make in-game adjustments, because that's what it really comes down to when you're playing those new teams. But think about Tennessee. Their season really turned around when they were absolutely walloped at Rupp Arena in Lexington. After that, that's when they went on their run of 8 straight SEC wins. So, mixed in there, they had the really bad game at Texas, and then, they had the one loss at Arkansas. But they got back at Kentucky, kind of to your point of seeing them a second time. The same thing happens next Saturday. They get Arkansas back after Arkansas handed them their one loss since that Kentucky game. I think it'll be much different. And obviously Tennessee has been so great on their home court.
And great point you made. The parity in college basketball this year is just tremendous. I probably could name 10 to 15 teams that you could make an argument could win the national championship that are good enough with the parity. There's not a dominant team. We all thought Gonzaga, and they're probably a little bit better than everybody, but they're not leaps and bounds better than everybody. They lost to St. Mary's over the weekend. Again, I think there's 10 to 15 teams that could win the national championship this year, and probably 20 that could go to the Final Four.
Well, and then there's teams that can rise up. I mean, look at an Alabama.
Yep.
I mean, Alabama's had some of the most impressive games this year. They beat Gonzaga. They played great at times. And then they lost to Georgia. Yeah. That's Georgia's only win in the league this year. And they had other really bad performances. They're, to me, the most frustrating team to watch.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of all the threes that they shoot. I don't think they're very disciplined. I don't think they're great defensively. They turn the ball over like crazy. But they have stretches where when they're dialed in, they can be terrific. But overall, you can make a case for 10 to 15, but the rise up factor of some teams and then the drop down factor of some of those teams, outside of Gonzaga, I don't know who is first round upset proof. Maybe some of these, the 1 seeds, you're going to face a 16. So maybe I'll say for the top 15, I don't think there are many that are second round upset proof, because then it jumps up in terms of competition after that.
No doubt. What's happened to Tom Crean? I mean, he had a bad run at Indiana. You thought, okay, he had a couple of good years in Indiana, but then he just couldn't get and he's just fallen off the cliff here at Georgia. What's going on with down there?
He hadn't been able to recruit. I mean, he had Anthony Edwards, but he didn't have enough after that or in addition to him. And it's just a tough building. It's a tough place for basketball. They just haven't had success in a while. And I think it comes down to recruiting. It was kind of an odd hire initially. I mean, obviously the name, the resume, certainly worthy, but just
not in the
Georgia,
SEC, not in the SEC.
It was just different. But I think it just comes down to dudes. He just hasn't had the dudes. And so Georgia, I would expect I don't know how much longer that's going to go. Obviously, he gives them some credibility with his name and his background, but that hasn't translated into recruiting. So they may
similar
need
to
something
what Patrick Ewing's going through at Georgetown. Patrick Ewing's really struggling at Georgetown. I don't even think they've won a conference game this year. And, everybody thought him going back to Georgetown would bring some recruiting respectability, and it just hasn't for whatever reason. It's a tricky situation, and see how long they're going to. And then I know Crean there was a coaching issue a week or so back where a guy got suspended, maybe an assistant coach or something. There was an incident. And so you just wonder if that's going to be the end of Tom Crean in Athens. Especially with the expectation of the football program winning as big as they're winning, there's got to be some expectation for the basketball program a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to be a force, but at least be competitive.
Yeah. And there's money there. I mean, football is generating tons of money. That arena is not, just not a difference maker there for them. That's actually who Tennessee plays in the midweek on Tuesday. So that, with Arkansas next, you gotta be aware that you don't overlook Georgia there. Yeah, Georgia played Auburn to the wire at home,
right?
And beat Alabama. So we'll see if Tennessee's prepared, but there's no reason why Tennessee shouldn't win that game. But yeah, Georgia has been a struggle for a while.
It's the SEC this year is very, very strong at the top. You got Auburn, you got Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, 4 quality teams that you could, again, make a legitimate argument. They could all make the Final Four. They could easily win 4 games in March to get to the Final Four. SEC tournament coming to Tampa next week. that should be a bloodbath to get through the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals.
Well, for those 4 teams, they get the pass to Friday, so that's a
Right.
plus. And then you're going to get a good team regardless of who's coming through. You could be set up and have one of those second tier teams, an Alabama or an LSU, that maybe even a Florida, Mississippi State. They're all going to be dangerous. They've all risen up and beaten good teams this year. So it's going to be tough. You could see some of these I would expect 1 or 2 of those top 4 seeds to be upset and be one and done. Not going to help your seeding, obviously, if you do that. But if anyone's trying to improve their seeding, Jason, I think there's opportunities there because you're going to run into good teams quickly. Say, I don't know how
who's that sleeper team that's a 7 or 8 seed in the SEC that you like that said, hey, they could win a couple games either in the SEC tournament or slide into the into March and win a game or 2 in March?
Honestly, I don't trust any of them really. I'd probably say to win maybe a few games in Tampa, I might say LSU out of that second group. Alabama can, as well, but I would say Alabama for a 1-game rise up. They're too inconsistent for me, I think, to string too many games together. So they could pull a major upset in the NCAA tournament and then lose to somebody that's a double-digit seed that looks like a favorable matchup for them, and then erase what they just did. So I think LSU potentially, because now they have Xavier Pinson back. They got inside game. When they're dialed in, they can defend pretty well. I know Will Wade is not a fan favorite around the league, but I would say, and they were playing really well early in the year. They were one of those preseason teams. It was kind of 5 teams, and LSU was in that group at the beginning of the year. So I'd probably say LSU the most, but not for very deep runs in the NCAA tournament. I think it's going to come from those top 4.
Who do you like to give me again, out of those top 4 SEC teams, who do you think is going to do the most damage in the NCAA tournament?
Well, Arkansas is playing the best ball right now. I'm thinking that will end in Knoxville against Tennessee. And look, Kentucky, you just have to wonder, are they healthy? When they're healthy, I know Ty Washington came back, you had Xavier Wheeler back, but when they're healthy playing, they're as good as it gets in the country. Auburn is not playing their best ball. They even in the games they've won, they've had a lot of those close shaves against the lesser competition in the league. Auburn's the deepest team, but I don't think they're playing their best ball, especially on the perimeter where you have to be good in the NCAA tournament. I would say probably a healthy Kentucky, but look, Tennessee is right there with Arkansas in playing the best ball. I still have some reservations with them because we do see the just horrific shooting at times, and they don't always get the inside scoring. They did against Auburn. I mean, it was amazing what they did against Auburn on the boards. They out-rebounded Auburn with Wheeler and Smith, and that kind of size and mismatch on the perimeter. Out-rebounded Auburn 54-31.
Yeah.
And Tennessee had 21 offensive rebounds against that size and that talent.
Right.
It's a 4-man post for Tennessee, and there's a couple of freshmen in there in that rotation and a couple of vets. So what are you going to get? Collectively, I think they had 29 rebounds, 14 points, something like that, 14, 15 points against Auburn. If you get that kind of collective productivity and you have the guards you do, and Josiah Jordan-James, who is a glue guy who can rebound, switch defensively, developed into a voice leader, now you have something special. This team does have deep NCAA tournament potential. If we hadn't seen those bad offensive shooting games, I might have a little bit more confidence in them. And we've seen those disappointments before at Tennessee in the postseason. So that's a little bit of my reservation with them. But the ability certainly is there for them to make as deep a run of anyone. But I guess if I had to say who goes the deepest, and this is for the NCAA tournament you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably say Kentucky, but if they have one guy out, things drastically change for them.
Sure. And one thing I'd say about the SEC, give the SEC credit. About 5 years ago, they really made an emphasis in the SEC office to really make basketball a priority as much as football. They hired a couple people administratively that were really focusing on the basketball teams. Just your thoughts about how the SEC basketball conference has really elevated itself in the last probably 5 years as far as consistently being one of the top 2 or 3 conferences in college basketball every year.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people nationally that have claimed that the SEC is the best league. I think there's a great argument for that. I think part of that is you have some of those bottom teams that have risen up some and are competitive. The Texas A&Ms, the Vanderbilt. You don't have 4 teams that are like Georgia is this year. You just pretty much have Georgia. So, and then obviously the profile even changed from the beginning of the year, Jason. It was thought that you had 4 or 5 top level teams in the SEC, but I don't think anyone thought that those were Final Four type of teams.
Right.
And the way the season has played out, you still have 4 top level teams, but now you have Final Four contenders in them. Earlier in the year, it looked like it was Kentucky and Auburn and maybe, Sweet 16-ish for Arkansas, Tennessee.
Yep.
Now Arkansas and Tennessee are playing better than Kentucky and Auburn, and both having beaten those top 2 teams. So they've kind of come back. So now where are they? Are they all 4 Final Four contenders? Or are they all back to kind of the Sweet 16, maybe Elite Final 8 level?
Right.
But it's a high bar, and it is deep a group that you could make a Final Four case for as any conference in the country.
No
but
doubt.
Coaching, you're right. I'm sorry, coaching, you're right. That's what really was the turnaround when they started hiring big level coaches in this league year after year after year, and it started adding up. And that's why some of these programs have changed.
Give me a quick note on Tennessee women's basketball. Their conference tournaments this week. Seems like there's been a little bit of a resurgence out of Tennessee the last year or so with the new, once they got remind me of the Holly. What was Holly's?
Holly Warlick. Yeah.
She left. They brought in a Kelly
Harper.
Yep. She's finally seems like she's getting things back on track. Tennessee women's basketball wise.
Yeah. The Lady Vols had a good year. They're the 3 seed in the SEC tournament, which is actually in Nashville where the men's tournament typically is.
Yeah, right.
So the one year that they cycle out of Nashville, the women go there. But, Tennessee has had a good year, the Lady Vols. The problem is that it kind of went south late. They lost to 3 unranked teams in Auburn, Alabama, and Florida. They have not been good on the road. They've honestly been really bad on the road in conference play, and they've had injuries. They haven't had a fully healthy Ray Burrell, was their best player arguably last year. She missed the first part of the year and she's come back, but she's never been the star she was last year. Then they lost their top bench player in Kean Green, who was their first post off the bench. That kind of is what really has started their slide in losing her. You didn't think that would have an impact, but they haven't been able to replace her minutes and her physicality. And now they lost their best overall player that had been playing this year in Jordan Horston. Lost her a couple of games ago, and she led them in scoring, rebounding, their top defender. I mean, she really had taken the mantle as the top player, and with an elbow injury. And now we don't know if they're going to get her back. Unlikely. So this is a much different team than the record and the seeding that they earned as a full body of work. Turned the ball over just way too much. And right now, that margin of error, they can't overcome it like they did earlier in the year. So look, can they win some games in Nashville? Sure they can. The first game they get on Friday will be against either Georgia, who they beat this year, Alabama, who one of those teams they lost to, and they also beat at home. And then Auburn, who they lost to, will be one of those 3 teams. So this team can be one and done, or they can string a couple of games together, but they're not beating South Carolina.
Right.
So
Right.
SEC championship game, I don't see it. It's South Carolina's league right now. They're the boss. And I really don't see a deep run in the NCAA tournament because their injuries would have been interesting to see, because this is a better team under Kelly Harper. If they had all their pieces, what they would be like, but that's not the reality. So I think it's going to make it really tough for them in the tournament.
I got you. All right, you're listening to Vince Ferrara, 99.1 Knoxville Sports Radio. He does tons and tons of stuff for 99.1. He's covering Tennessee. He does play-by-play for Tennessee baseball. He does MMA. He does high school football in the area. So very versatile, does tons of stuff. Does a bunch of stuff with the radio network up there and does great work. And he's a Tampa guy, so I even like him even that much more. So let's get to some baseball. Major League Lockout, kind of the deadline is kind of looming about whether MLB's regular season will start on time or not. I know you're a big baseball guy. Give me your thoughts on just the general thoughts of the lockout and what you think is going to happen.
Well, I don't see how they don't miss games. I mean, that would, they were kind of putting this as the deadline. So I think that's going to happen. I don't think Major League Baseball, for whatever reason, is that concerned about missing games. They said they were, but that's Rob Manfred speaking. So who's buying that? It's unfortunate. It's sad. As always, you have billionaires and millionaires arguing, and then the fans are the ones that lose out.
Right.
This sport is already behind football and basketball. That gap continues to expand in terms of their relevancy and the young people investing in the sport. Just unfortunate that they can't come together. I think they'll eventually get a deal done, but it's probably going to be pretty ugly. I wonder, how that affects college baseball. If, say, ESPN and the networks are missing out on the inventory, do they move up some college baseball games and start putting them into some of those prime spots where MLB would be? I don't know. Maybe college baseball can take advantage of it, or will people look at the sport overall and then just shut it down and not even give college baseball a chance because they're so mad at Major League Baseball and kind of guilt by association? So I don't know how that will play out, but I think we're going to miss some games and we'll probably have a shortened season. Just sad the way they're run, what they're arguing about. It's very, very frustrating.
No, you're right. It's they can't get out of their own way. They get some success.
Yeah.
Things they have a couple good postseasons, and all of a sudden they got this, and they take one step forward and 3 steps back. And like you said, with the young fans especially, they have a real tough time connecting with those people and keeping those people engaged and all that stuff. So, all right, last thing, and I'll get you out of here. Quick football note: big quarterback hunting this offseason. A lot of QB changes. Who do you see anybody making any changing? You think Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers? What do the Bucks do at quarterback? Just your general thoughts on the quarterback situation in the NFL.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go down the SEC football quarterback route. No Tennessee football question, but spring practice is coming soon. There's only so much time. I got you. No, I obviously there's a lot of intrigue. We'll see what Aaron Rodgers does. It probably makes the most sense for him to stay in Green Bay. Because look, if he goes somewhere else, then what that team is going to have to give up to get him. Now you're going to be depleted. You may not have the defense or the weapons that you're looking for. So it makes the most sense for him to be in Green Bay. Russell Wilson looks like he's going to have a new home. I think the Steelers would make a lot of sense for him.
Yep.
What in the Bucks division, what do the Bucks do? I don't buy this Blaine Gabbert stuff from Bruce Arians.
Please. Please.
Yeah. Now I'll listen to, our guy, TJ Reeves and others maybe make a case for Kyle Trask. Certainly I saw him
Yeah.
in the SEC. He's still young enough
Yeah.
to where you could say, hey, we believe in him and his future in his hometown, things like that. But not Blaine Gabbert.
No.
I still think you got to bring in an established quarterback to some degree. But honestly, like I was asked, hey, which one of these quarterbacks would you want for this team? I think somebody asked me about the Saints. And I'm like, or M, none of the above. Like,
Yes.
I don't like a lot of these guys. Jimmy G, I'll listen to you at the right price. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's a winner. And if you have enough around him, which the Bucks do, I think that he's a guy that I think is a little bit above some of the other options that are out there. Would not bring Jameis Winston back. I don't want to hear that stuff. Jameis Winston needed Sean Payton, and I think Sean Payton helped him, but I don't think Jameis Winston now is a totally new guy, especially because he's not going to be coached this year by Sean Payton. So it's these pieces, but Russell Wilson, to me, if Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, he's obviously the top get out of all those quarterbacks in that domino. And then everybody else is going to be like, really, is this the best that we got? Maybe a Mitchell.
Deshaun Watson's the wild card. If his legal stuff gets wrapped up or gets settled to some degree, he'll obviously draw a lot of interest as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, but he's got to get past that. Now they're talking about maybe the actual legal portion of it instead of just a civil suit.
Right. True.
So that might delay things, and they're kind of hoping that could get done before the draft. And look, the draft process to me, Jason, is one of the coolest things because it combines my two biggest loves, the NFL and college football. Those worlds come together. So I love the draft process, Senior Bowl, watching practices, love the combine. We'll watch all of that, all the draft and the mock draft. I love all that kind of stuff. It's so intriguing. So we'll definitely stay locked into that moving forward.
All right. Give me an SEC spring football note. I know you got something. Give me a something in the SEC spring football.
Yeah, well, first, we don't know. It doesn't look like Tennessee is going to have a spring game. They're doing renovations to Neyland Stadium. Okay. So there's cranes and sections of the stadium that are completely, bulldozed and being reworked. So that's not an option for them. They were looking into Nashville for the longest time, but now on April 16th, where they were thinking about maybe being at Nissan Stadium, now Garth Brooks has that date for a concert. So unless they're willing to move their spring date from where they were targeting, they may not have one this year, which will be very, very strange. Is it the end of the world? No, but just kind of unusual for a school to not have one. And this Tennessee team looked like they were on track to maybe be the one and only SEC team to not have any staff coaching changes. But Cody Burns left at wide receivers coach. He did a great job. He left for the Saints wide receiver job. And now Georgia needs an offensive line coach after Matt Luke stepped away. And Glenn Ellerbe, who did a nice job on Tennessee's O-line, he is one of those names that's showing up on some list. Don't know if he's going to get that gig or not. So now you're trying to hold things together while you hire a new coach. So the kind of those moving pieces with the Tennessee coaching staff too. But they
have a good recruit. What was their good thoughts about their recruiting class?
Yeah, recruiting, it depends on the service. Rivals had them as the highest. They were anywhere from 12 to 20 in those services. Okay. So averaged out, 15, 16, considering the NCAA stuff that was hovering over the staff the entire year.
Excellent.
I think they did a really good job. They have to be much better in state, and they have to get the elite prospects. If they do that, then those are two boxes Josh Heupel needs to check. So do they bring in a recruiter for that wide receiver spot, or do they just kind of stick to, hey, we want to bring the best developer that can also recruit? Right. So we'll see. Fans always throw out the former Tennessee players as candidates and stuff, but I can't wait for spring ball. That's another thing. I eat up those practices. As long as we get to watch them, you can get something out of it. At least I can. So that's just around the corner. So add that to the list. We got basketball, we got baseball.
Yeah.
Next, it will spring football, and you'll have an overlap of all those. And my sleep will go from like 4 hours to 2.
No, and Vince does a great job, video stuff, videoing clips, practice clips, game clips. He does an awesome job with 99.1. Tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll find all the good stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Vince Sports, and then our website, if you're watching on video, 991thesportsanimal.com. Go to the blog section where you can find some of my blogs. There is a good chance we'll be in Tampa for the SEC men's basketball tournament. Hope to see you there, Jason. Yeah. And that'll be a lot of fun. So that'll take me away from baseball and everything else for a while if that happens. And then as long as they're in the NCAA tournament, I think there's a chance I'll follow this Tennessee basketball team through the NCAA tournament as well. So it could be a lot of fun, and we'll have all the coverage there on our website. And then at Vince Sports, all the social media accounts are with that tag, including YouTube, where you can follow me there. And then I have a broadcasting website as well if you want to hear any of my work or watch any of my work, vincesports.net.
Awesome, man. Keep up the great work, Vince. You do an awesome job up there. Again, it was sunny and 85 the last several days down here. Went to the beach yesterday.
Oh, killing me. I only look like I went to the beach.
Yes.
I'm trying to like will my way into those Tampa temps, but not yet.
We'll look forward to maybe seeing you next week for the SEC tournament, man. Keep up the great work, and we will talk real soon.
You as well. Can't wait. Thanks, Jason.
All right, Vince, appreciate it. And we'll be right back on the Powers on Sports podcast.